The following conversation is between me and Jordan Christensen of The Draw, and we talk about the New Mexico draw. But in addition to that, we talk about a whole bunch of other bigger picture things, like the macro picture around draw strategy, right? Not just in New Mexico, in Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, anywhere out there. The draw dynamics are shifting and they're going to continue to shift. So, we talk about some of these big picture ideas that are for sure going to help you with draws in the future. So if you're a new hunter or if you've been putting in for years and you've got 20 points in some of these states, you should listen to this conversation. Now, if you specifically just want to listen to the nitty gritty detail about New Mexico, specific units, specific species you should focus on, the whole concept of the guide draw, the different probability and statistics that go along with that, then go directly to those points. You can skip the other stuff. I'll put some great timestamps on this video so you can do just that. But across the board, a ton of good information here. Jordan is a great resource. And the thing about Jordan is he does have a service to sell, right? And we go over the nitty gritty of that. He's got a very successful business over the last 5-10 years, managing draw applications, helping people choose, the right units, the right species to apply for. But he doesn't continually push that. He's very open, with information, with concepts, even specific units, specific regions. I love the guy for that. Check him out at The Draw. His Instagram is We Are The Draw. His website is The Draw. Go check him out. You can check out the different service offerings he has. This is a fun one, guys. Let's jump right in. All right, so I've got Jordan Christensen from The Draw with us today, and we're going to focus on the New Mexico draw. The deadline's coming up here. But first, Jordan, what I really want to talk about, we were chatting about it right before I hit record, and that's I just want to hear, you've been in this business for over a decade now. You've had the draw for over 5 years. What's changed in terms of these draw hunts, and what like from a macro perspective, what should hunters really be thinking about here over the next few years?
Yeah, it's a great topic because I think that it just creates a better understanding. I think when people are looking at investing in applications as a means to go hunting, one of the unfortunate realities when I see we get these phone calls on a regular basis that maybe even folks have taken that first step themselves, right? Is a lack of understanding that as mature as these systems have gotten, and for so many of us, we weren't even old enough to get in on the front end of it, right?
Sure.
And take advantage of that. But as they've matured, there's definitely different wrinkles and things like that that have kind of manifested, where there is still opportunities, lots of opportunities for guys just getting started. But where it really kind of like one of the things we love to articulate and help guys understand is that there are lots of places that if we're going to invest the money in the applications and the hunting licenses, that very much is a means to an end. We can forecast a successful draw pretty clearly in a number of states. And yet, on the flip side of that, there is so many of these states, even states that have point systems associated with them, that you're so far behind the curve that choosing to apply and spend money in those states is in every way, shape, and form just gambling for hunting, which
Yeah.
is
It's
totally fine,
but
right?
it's wild how many people don't realize that's what it is.
They don't.
Or another way you could put it with the silver lining is it's donations, really, right? Like
Sure, yeah, like
you know,
we're doing our part. Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that for folks who are just kind of dipping their toe in the water, if they have, let's just say, $100 to spend, and then they were going to find a way, and 100's a little light, but for all intents and purposes, if they're going to spend that $100, I believe that most of them would like to know that the $100 they're spending is in fact a means to an end. It means that possibly the following year, or 2 or 3 years down the road, that when they submit that application, that they will in fact draw, and everything goes full circle. Whereas there's plenty of states out west, and particularly the ones that seem like the Utah, the Nevada, the Arizona, that some of the very best representations of the species are coming out of, that we'll get guys on the phone that maybe they've even done that for 10 years, right? Like, and they're not calling as much of anything to help. They know what to do. They know how to do it.
Sure.
They've got the one place that they're applying for. The hard reality is when we start showing them the math behind where they're at, and it's like, well, you're actually a long ways from
Yeah,
drawing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
what do you mean? I've been doing this for 10 years, and it's like, I completely sympathize with that. I'm only 41 years old, and my dad was a visionary, where I have over 20 points in places. I've been
Sure.
applying for over half my life in some of these places, and so I can sympathize. I feel like very clearly with guys who've played it for a long time, and yet there still isn't an opportunity there. Our goal is to help guys understand, if they're going to spend any money, whatever that is, that we can categorize it in two places, that it is a means to an end, or it is gambling for hunting. And if you end up like me, that you're hopelessly addicted. And if your wife ever finds out how much you on the game, then so be it. But doing what I do makes almost no sense to 99% of the public. It's almost like I would never ever want to see somebody jump in to where they're spending even a fraction of what I personally am spending every year in this game. Because it's like any new thing. You don't know if you're going to like it or not. And if you
Sure.
completely, if you are a glut for punishment like me, and you find this weird satisfaction in even a no application, or an unsuccessful application, so be it. But I think easing into it, and particularly focusing on places that you're going to draw, you're going to have a finish line, whether it's a year later, 3 years later, whatever it is, it makes so much more sense to kind of dip your toe in those waters first. And then if you have the means and you just like the game, then great. Like, we can show guys more always, that exists out there. But it is, in the world we're living in, not having a clear understanding of what the dollars are actually doing for you is an unfortunate conclusion that guys come to it, whether it's us articulating that to them or they eventually find out for themselves. It's like, geez, some of this stuff is a serious, like,
Right.
investment. And not to say that there isn't lightning strikes, it happens all the time,
Yeah, yeah,
but
sure.
it is, for most of us, it's those aren't even long-term goals in some of these places. It's just a chance, and you can't win if you don't play. But I think that people can have a lot of fun doing that if they know day one going into it that that's what we're doing,
Yeah, yeah.
versus the other
Yeah,
stuff.
I think you kind of frame it in the conceptually as it's like an investment strategy,
Yeah,
right? And I think it's a perfect way to explain it, because to me, the biggest changes over the last like 10, 15 years that I've seen, Jordan, like when I was a little bitty kid, it was like, oh, you start putting in for points in Wyoming, you're eventually going to draw a sheep tag. If
the
you
best,
put in, yeah, that's how everybody used to think about putting in for draws. But it's not like that anymore. Like, I mean,
and
yeah, I think I had 13, 14 points in Wyoming. And 2 years ago, when they made a little quota shift there, I looked at it, did the math, and I'm like, dude, it's over. Like, that
we
doesn't,
pulled back with so many guys, and it was such a hard pill to. I mean, and again,
but
I'm lucky
it
because
was
I always find
in,
myself.
yeah, it's an investment decision, right? You look at the math, makes no sense.
Yeah, my own
Yeah.
father. Now, mind you, he's much older. He's 76 years old, and he's probably not in the best shape for a 76-year-old. He had 21 points,
Ah,
and the math still makes sense for him. Like,
yeah, sure.
it talk about hard swallow. Like, it was, and so I could sympathize with guys, but our job isn't to do anything other than just try and distribute information so guys can make their own decision on that. But we did have so many walk away, especially in that kind of slot that you're talking about. Call it 9 to 15 points. Like,
Yeah.
that's a that's a long time to invest in something and then have to walk away.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, things are evolving so fast, that that is seems like every year we have something new, because the states are almost acknowledging how broken their systems
Oh
are,
yeah,
and
sure.
so they are trying to incorporate new legislation to help with how broken the systems are. And sometimes that's good for non-residents, sometimes it's bad for non-residents, and yet, uh, it's it's it does, at a minimum, there's always something new coming down the pipeline that is kind of a cause, has a cause and effect for guys, and especially as you're just getting started, um, having a better, clearer understanding of what you're investing in, it makes sense for any topic, not hunting and application, but it is an investment, because look at, adding to this kind of thought, and maybe we can, this would be a final thing. Where the investment comes is how much, this is something I'm not as familiar as I should be, but even in a middle of the road voucher for deer or elk in Colorado, and let's just take a really small window in the last 5 years, what have you seen happen to those prices from in the last 5 years on not even like top shelf vouchers in Colorado? Has it doubled?
Yeah, probably at least. And what I would say is it's actually an interesting topic because I find that these sort of things actually lag a little bit. So it's almost like there was probably a couple years there, like 5 or 6 years ago, where guys were getting ripping deals. You know what I
Yeah.
mean, Jordan? Because the draws were bumping up, particularly in the good areas. Guys were getting ripping deals. And a lot, and what I saw is people actually established relationships during that period of time. So some of them are still getting ripping deals just because they get they got voucher
Good.
relationships with landowners. But
Yeah.
the market has for sure doubled.
Yeah. We see
And
it first in New Mexico. Same
sure.
idea.
Yep.
I mean, the cost that not even the hunt, just the tag is accruing these days. If you if you have the means to spend that kind of money, even if you have the means to do it, to not be applying and create a situation where maybe it's 2 times in a 10-year period that you can bypass that cost, it is crazy that that could literally be $10,000-15,000 in savings easily. It could easily be triple that as
Yeah.
well. But for just a middle of the road nice opportunity, I feel very safe saying that you would save yourself, $10,000 in a 10-year period easily, if not more,
Yeah. You
because
you mean by having like an effective draw strategy?
yeah, because
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
using the application to create the opportunity, once or twice in a 10-year period, maybe even more than that. But if
Sure.
you're inclined to spend the money anyways, to not be participating in the draw process and save yourself that money, where it's, especially states like Colorado and New Mexico's a weird asterisk, in the big picture of things, because we do draw so many tags down here for
Sure.
so many things, that even though it's not as formal as, say, a state like Colorado or Wyoming is, if guys are committed and they're playing that game for an extended period of time, without question, they're gonna draw. It's amazing to me how many guys that hunt every year in New Mexico, but in a 10-year period, we're gonna draw them a couple of tags, and they're gonna go on the same hunt, same season date, same
Sure.
dirt, for a fraction of what it was costing them on the other years that they didn't draw.
Yeah. No, I hear you, Jordan. And I totally agree that people should look at that. I actually think the inverse is true too for some people. There's a lot of people who are struck on, they want to hunt a lot and they have the means to hunt a lot. They got the time to do it. They've got the disposable income and they never look at land voucher programs. I think that the ideal situation is if you want to hunt a lot, do both. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
both. And we can go way down this rabbit hole, but there are ways to utilize applications to create opportunities as often as you want to go hunting. If we have a guy, a very common, like one of the first questions guys get when they call us is, in a 10-year period, if there was no variables, if you could just do whatever you
Sure.
wanted, how often would you like to go? And it's very common answer that they want to go once a year, right? They want
Yeah.
to have something to look forward to. And then we'll usually ask them, the second question is putting like deer and elk and antelope in a box, and not, we end up covering sheep, moose, and goats and stuff like that later, but just focusing on deer, elk, and antelope. Is there one species or the other that really is kind of your primary focus? Is that something, which one really keeps you up at night? And the truth of the matter is, Cliff, no matter what their answer is to those questions, whether it's once a year, twice a year, elk, deer, antelope, what, maybe they don't, they just want to hunt all of them. If guys are willing to hunt different states year over year, they could end up hunting the same place potentially a couple of times in that 10-year period.
Sure.
But if year over year, if they're willing to go Montana one year, and then Colorado the next, and then Wyoming, maybe they luck into a New Mexico here and there, then those, without ever spending $1 on vouchers and
Sure.
landowner things like that, that's very feasible. And I think that for folks who've never dipped their toe in that water and looked at those as a means to create opportunities, I think part of that is because there is some information that gets out there, kind of rightfully so, like that, when it takes somebody 20 years to draw some tag, they tell everyone about it, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a big thing. It's almost even a badge of honor in the hunting community that you drew some tag that took that long. And so I think that there is a misunderstanding in a lot of folks on not just that, yes, those exist, but that there is also so many things that are much more turnkey, that are
Sure.
1 year next type of opportunities. And it can allow guys, well, it's another question I ask guys, like elk, we'll take that for an example. When guys like, I want to go elk hunting, a question that needs to be asked is, are you looking to get into elk hunting, or you're looking to kind of like check a life goal box, right? Like,
Sure.
I want to kill an elk. And for so many people, I think that is the goal, is to get into elk hunting. And so the only way to do that is either pull out your checkbook and stroke a check, fairly regularly, or leverage these application systems that exist in these different states, so that we can now draw periodically from one to the next, and we're getting to hunt as often as we want, but
Right.
we're not necessarily do it by writing a $5,000 to $10,000 check every year.
Right. Sure. And on that topic, it's a little bit off, but I think it relates, Jordan. I want to know your opinion, man. Do you feel like part of the challenge that people face is that they're just inherently inflexible? And I mean that in the terms of like hunting different states or even within species. And the reason I say that, I know you hunt multiple species, and I've built my whole career around elk hunting, man. But I personally, I love elk hunting, but I also love hunting a lot of other species. And part of in that, I feel like has allowed me to have way more opportunities, just because I kind of embrace that flexibility, where I know a lot of guys who I feel like they have a lot of undue frustration because they are inflexible in those ways. Do you have an opinion on that?
I think that you're exactly right. And I think that what it really boils down to, and oddly enough, I got a brother that falls in this category. This
Okay.
guy butt off, right? All the time. But I think the being willing to spend the money, and kind of be the first to take a leap of faith, is a really hard. He's getting better at it these days, but it's really hard for him. It's like the time away from work, the time away from family, the overall cost of not just the tags, but being there, and whatever kind of accommodations he's choosing to sleep in and things of that nature, have been uh, what's the right word? It's a hard leap for him to take, to be kind of the first one, let's say in the family or in the group, to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to just go figure it out. They would like a little bit more momentum in those places, with somebody that they trust, to say it's going to be okay. And oddly enough, I think that we can end up as a company, and as the relationships build, we are helping guys with that. We
Sure.
become that trust, and that um, person that went first to help establish that. Because I think that whether it's a species thing or it's a new state or something of that, there's not a lot of hunters that, if they're taken by the hand by somebody they trust and say, just dude, come do this with me. I went and
Sure.
did it, or I went and did it last year, and they're willing, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna, now there's the comfort level. It's and I see that even on a much larger scale. It's like the first time you go to Africa, the first time you go to Mexico, the
Sure.
first there's all this anxiety, and I think that it's not as talked about. But the first time you go to Montana, the same level, maybe for different reasons slightly, but there is still some anxiety about, is this going to work out?
Sure.
Is it going to be okay? And I think it's a very common thing that you're bringing up, that hunters have. And yet, if they're taken by the hand, and showed a path, and where, we have so many guys that uh, are inclined to just go DIY, right?
Sure.
And it's kind of an interesting little niche that we found ourselves in. We have plenty of guys that want to go with a guide and spend that money and do all of that stuff. But from early on, as the draw started, different than when I was at Cabela's, we get quite a few people that their entire plan is around the DIY.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if and where we're applying guys, that's a very important question to us, because we're going to apply guys differently that are planning a DIY hunt than a guided hunt. If I have a guide established in some area or the other, the truth of the matter is, I may not know a whole lot of the intimate details about what he's doing when he's there conducting his hunts, be it on public land or private land. There's
Sure.
just a trust that's been established over years and track record and everything, that we're just kind of letting that momentum carry the guy that wants to go with a guide. When the guy's DIY, we want to make sure that we're applying accordingly, so that we can be as much help as we can on the backside of that. It's like, hey, listen, I can't give you an exact X on a map of where you're going to find a big elk or a big deer, or whatever it is, but I
Yeah.
can tell you that, like, when I was there, this is where I camped, and it was pretty good. But when the week was over, I kind of feel like I might have should have camped over here, and
Sure.
I had this and that, and so that's where I feel like, and it's something of it. Maybe call it a personal satisfaction. Like, those guys are so fun to me.
Yeah.
Like, buddy.
That segment's growing too, I think, Jordan.
Oh,
I think it's
sure.
really an interesting.
It's why it's getting harder to draw
Yeah,
a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah. I think it's really. I think that's probably the segment that's they're big Cam Hain followers, or or what, they're into, like the backpack hunting or that sort of thing. And I've always debated with it, or not debated with it, really thought about it in depth. Why there is. I mean, I know a lot of guys who have plenty of disposable income to hire guides on every single hunt they go on, but
Sure.
they don't want to. They want to do it the do it yourself way. And I think in some ways, to them, it elevates the goal a little bit, and I understand that. But it's interesting because,
I have to buy governor's tags that that
oh
that that
yeah,
that are that for one reason or the next, the sometimes on a governor's tag, let alone other tags, like, their goal with it is very much all of a sudden that DIY type of thing. And I think a lot of people would be surprised about that, but I think that there is something to be said, and I think that it's a personal thing, and I think it's you're putting it in a different category when you go that method and you go that route, and it changes what the objective is and the goals are. But to your point, even guys that are spending that kind of money, it's not completely uncommon. And do they
Sure.
end up on every single social media page when they do stuff like that? No, nobody
Yeah.
talks about. Nobody does. It doesn't blow up and break the internet. But for them, it's they love it just like the other guys love it, and they don't. And then most of those guys kind of keep to themselves anyway. So it's
Yeah,
not like
sure.
they're blowing those things up about themselves, but they're a lot that, yeah, they have the means to do whatever they want, but it is a growing segment, and those guys appreciate those experiences just like the rest of us, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, sure. No, I totally, and I don't know where you fall on that spectrum, but I do both personally, do it
Oh,
yourself
yep.
stuff and guided stuff. I'm very into
I work for things on purpose, be it with my wife or my brothers, to go DIY. I
sure.
also have a lot of times that if I draw some unicorn tag somewhere, like, absolutely, I'm going to double down on that moment and try and give myself the very best chance to do to get the most out of that experience. And so again, it's even like it's all different categories. Like I want those experiences with my family, and yet, do I want them there when it comes to some elite tag? Absolutely, that's what my main goals always are. But the idea of not doubling down, if I drew some sheep tag in Nevada, or
Right.
a very good deer elk tag in Arizona or Utah, I mean, even Utah where I grew up, there is a very high probability that I'm going to spend the money, because it's like, man, I just hit a lightning
Yeah,
strike,
sure.
less than 1%, or I just spent 20 years waiting on this opportunity. I want to give myself the best chance of really doing something special with this elite opportunity. But on a year-to-year basis, I'm always trying to find those DIY opportunities with my family to because I don't like, yeah, the lightning strikes are cool, but if I'm waiting on those my entire career, I never get to hunt, and I have to
Yeah.
hunt. My soul requires it. Like, I
Yeah, yeah.
gotta
No, I
go.
totally understand. I think we're similar to that in that regard, man. Um, dude, we could talk about this forever, Jordan. So let's jump into the New Mexico draw so people who are watching for that kind of get that covered. So yeah, give me the rundown on like when the applications are due. Um and and then I'll go through that logistical part of it. I want to talk about the guide draw a little bit. I want to cover that for me off the bat. I've had some questions on that. And after that I've got a simple question for you, but go for those first and we'll go from there. And we'll get into species and stuff.
Yep. So first, the deadline is going to be 5 p.m. Mountain Time on March 20th, right? That 5 p.m. seems to catch guys off guard occasionally. Procrastinators that like, I'll take care of it. Most applications are due at midnight on the day of. New Mexico's, like Alaska, is at 5 p.m. So we don't want to let it even get to deadline day in New Mexico. The second thing is New Mexico is a very unique draw process comparing it to so many of the other states. And where that the first part of that is that in New Mexico, there is usually 4 or 5 options that choices that you have on the application. Fourth choice and fifth choice are kind of species unique, and they're very different. So as a general rule, 99% of non-residents who are applying should just disregard that fourth and fifth choice. There's no value at all in doing anything with the fourth and fifth choice for most people. That being said, very different than most of these states. The first, second, and third choice the state is gonna look at all 3 of those choices prior to moving to the next applicant. And so when you come out of the hat, if there are any tags available in your first or your second or your third choice, then you draw, right? And
Right.
so different than so many places. You can chase the odds and apply for some subpar or less notable hunts as a first, second, and third choice, and try really hard to just get a tag in your pocket. Or you could do three very elite choices that it's like, I don't want to go unless it's a very top shelf type opportunity. And what we do with lots of folks is who do want to go hunting is we'll put in for some elite destination as a first choice and then chase those odds with the second and third. If you come out real early in the draw, by all means, let's go somewhere top shelf. But in the meantime, maybe backing up the second and third with a higher probability of drawing gets a lot more, especially in a 10-year period, we're going to get a lot more value for the money that we're investing by rolling the dice in New Mexico.
Yeah.
And so,
and what is the all-in, or in general, what's the cost in terms of like they have to buy a license? What's the breakdown on that?
And New Mexico is becoming more unique because some of these states can continue going away from some of this process. But in New Mexico, you're going to be required to buy a hunting license and a stamp, which is $74 on the front end. And then each species is $13 for non-residents to apply. And then different than a lot of places nowadays, except Wyoming, and a few things in Idaho and Montana, is they require the cost of the tag up front just to get your name in the hat. So for a deer, if one of the choices is either a high demand or a quality tag, it's $355. If for an elk, if one of the choices is a high demand or a quality tag, it's $760. Antelope is just $270. Any which way we do it. The Oryx and the Ibex are $1,610. The bighorn sheep is $3,160. The Aoudad is $360. And so that actually is a good segue. So if you have a credit card that you can handle putting that on, your money's going to be tied up for typically about 45 days. And then New Mexico's gotten very good at getting those refunds, typically easily within a 72-hour period. Once the draw results post, you're going to get that refund right back to your card. Talking about the draw in our programs, one of the things that we created when we first got started, Cliff, was we do have in New Mexico, it falls right in line with it very well, is we have what we call a float program. And the floated program, essentially, what it boils down to is that we have a service fee per application. That's where our business makes our money. Is give it. On top of that, we work very closely with a bank that creates an opportunity where our customers, if they would rather not put the money up front, all of that money up front, then the bank charges them 9% of the cost of the tag. And none of that's refundable, but 9% of the cost of the tag, and you're in for all of those species. And so if you're successful drawing in the float program, then at that point we would need to square up on the cost of that license that you've drawn. But in order to get your name in the hat for a fraction of the overall cost and tying that money up, then we can now get you in for a lot less money. And that program in and of itself, in my opinion, is really cool. Like I do love it. But where it really starts to shine is when you start coupling that with our Kids Apply Free program. So in New Mexico, we all know there's a lot of really unique and incredible opportunities that New Mexico sets aside specifically for the kids. Well, if you're a family of 5 and you got a dad and 3 kids that want to apply,
even if you're posting up a lot of money,
and we're going to put in for all species, that's going to tee up about 30 grand, right? And maybe you don't even have a credit card that can handle that kind of money, or whether you do, but now that's a ton of money out of pocket. So if we have guys that the parent is participating in that floated program, then I'm allowed to now get the child in. And now the kids is $24 for the hunting license, $13 a species. And we're able to use the bank's money to get the kid applied up until they're 18 at $0. And so
Yeah.
an individual by himself leveraging the float program, it still makes sense to me. It helps a lot of guys. But if you're out there wanting to get your kids involved in some of these really unique opportunities that New Mexico has, being in our float program, in my opinion, is a no-brainer. Even if you do have a credit card, you could put 30 grand on. Why would you
Sure.
tie up that money when we'll do it for nothing?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, no,
So
absolutely. And what are some of those, Jordan? Are we talking about cow elk hunts? Good. Like, give me some depth on that.
a lot of states it is, right? It's like
Yeah.
cattle. So no, New Mexico is really amazing with this. Like we have some rifle deer hunts that I would argue are some of the best in the country, and I think that they're some of our best deer hunts in the state. Like there is not an adult deer hunt in the state as good as a couple of the youth deer hunts that
I
are
got you.
as far as location and time of year that you get to go into those places. But beyond that, if you just want to take your kid deer hunting, there is, I mean, there off the top of my head, there's got to be 30 plus of these units that are not as notable. It's just a chance to go deer hunting with them. But the drawing odds are relatively high in those places. The elk, there is a number of different elk hunts that are going to be like roughly the first week of October with a rifle. They're usually the archers are getting finished up, and then the first group that gets a chance to go in to those places is the youth hunters. Very uncommon that you wouldn't have bugling bulls and the
Sure.
big herd with the cows and things of that nature. Um, New Mexico has youth hunts set aside specifically for oryx hunting, not only on range but off range, that have incredible opportunities. So if you're looking for an off season type of hunt with your kid, those are out there. It used to be that there was ibex, but the way the quotas work, there really isn't any ibex youth hunts for
Sure.
non-resident longer. There is a tag for a Rocky Mountain bighorn and a tag for a desert bighorn
Okay.
set aside for kids that are under 18. We've drawn those tags a couple of times. We drew the Rocky tag last year. A young man that was 8 years old drew that tag,
Huh.
went and shot like 184-inch Rocky.
Oh, that's
It's
awesome.
an incredible story. It was, I mean, it's yeah, those are, so when we bring up youth, New Mexico really does stand out, in my opinion, in the Western states for not only creating the opportunity that are set aside for the kids, but really there is some top shelf opportunity. It's not just a chance to take your kid out
Right.
and shoot an animal. Like these are really elite tags that would be considered a high end anywhere in the country.
Yeah, like
And
awesome, awesome opportunities. And it's funny, Jordan, because if I get a guy, I get a lot of people just like my social media stuff, YouTube. People will come to me, they're, a guy is 35, 40 years old, and he wants to get into hunting. One of my first questions that I'll ask him is, hey, do you have a son or a daughter that also wants to hunt with you? Because a lot of times that's why, that's one of the reasons
we're
they want to get
right
into hunting.
when you get our first, we call it a hunt plan here. When you get kind of our initial breakdown of the states and species that we think make sense to you with your goals, the very bottom thing on that is, hey, if you have
Sure.
kids, talk to us about our Kids Apply Free program, because there is, if so many people knew, I mean, Colorado is a great example, right? Like
Yeah.
the cost versus exists for a kid in Colorado is 10x. Like if you're 12 years old, if you've got a kid that's 12 years old and they're not building points in Colorado, even if there isn't the means or the time to necessarily take them, to not get those points right now
Sure.
for
Yeah.
like $61 a year or something
Yeah.
like that. And they're getting deer, elk, antelope, sheep, moose, and goat. We could have a whole podcast just on
Yeah.
that. We
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
the
But
youth so amazing. Mexico, New Mexico is slightly unique in that sphere because there isn't a point system. So that's the other thing I would call out is like this is to go hunting now with them.
Sure.
This isn't a means to an end. This is because I want, and the fact that New Mexico does not have an age limit is another unique
Yeah,
thing about
younger kids can go.
it. They have a hunter's education card somewhere from any state.
Yep.
Now they're legal to go. That's how we had. I mean, that's how we've had an 8-year-old last year. We had a 6-year-old kill a desert bighorn on
Sure.
that youth 4 or 5 years ago. Um, uh, uh, yeah,
Yeah, like there's
they're
just a ton of different opportunities. And I think, it's obviously a great opportunity for the kid, but for a newer adult hunter, it's like, man, who cares if it's you shooting the animal or your kid? You're going to be able
right.
to experience a hunt that if you just do it on yourself, man, you may not experience that quality of a hunt. And this goes for the opportunities you're talking New Mexico, but other states too. Like you're not going to get that experience for 5, 6 years. So go with your kid because
Yeah.
you'll be able to get a really good hunting experience and also like build up your hunting skill set by hunting with your kid. So you got killing so many birds with one stone.
My own son, Parker, he is like this kid draws tags first of all, like he's shopping. But leveraging these opportunities that exist in New Mexico, he's 11 and he's at 6 different species. All of them come off draw tag
Sure.
opportunity that we're taking advantage of. What and are they the best? No, not as a general rule.
Sure.
Now he did have one lightning strike this year that was too good to be true. That I've been trying to draw a sheep tag for 24 or 25 years now,
Yeah.
and the good decided it was his turn after 3 years. So he drew a sheep tag here in New Mexico, which it kind of like that's on a macro scale. Like as far as your listeners and guys that are wondering, like, is it too late for me? Like this to me truly does tell guys how at what level it truly is anybody's game. We had 6 guys draw sheep tags last year, or 6 people, I'll say, draw sheep tags last year around the country. 2 of those 6 were adult men that had been applying for a while and playing the game.
Sure.
4 of them were, I don't know why that happened.
No idea, dude. Is it your
Yeah,
birthday or something?
yeah. That was somebody must have sent me a text or
You
something.
know
That
what
was great.
it might have been, man. I might have like when I scheduled the meeting, I might have said it was an hour, and maybe that was like an hour being like, "Hey, it's an hour."
Yeah,
I have
that
no
that
idea.
that could be. Um, the with 4 kids, 15 years and younger, drawing less than 1% chance sheep tags. If that isn't just a very clear visual on it's anybody's game.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
not just these guys that have, like myself, that have been applying for a couple of decades, waiting on our turn to go. It's almost like the hardest pill to swallow for guys like myself, that when I get on the phone with guys who have been applying for a long time, and it's a hard conversation to have, but as mature as these point systems are getting and as much interest as there is coming into these draws, our drawing odds are actually getting less
Right.
every, because there's that many more people we're competing against. Now, individually, obviously, we still have better odds than the guys just getting started. But if I have, let's take Utah, for example, I got 24 Desert Bighorn points. If 100 guys with 0 points apply for the same hunt that I'm applying for, the probability that one of them is going to draw versus myself is 3 times higher.
Sure.
100 tickets in there in that bucket with those guys as a group versus my 24. Like it's
Yeah.
way more probable, 3 times more probable. And so if you start looking at it again, we could easily drift back into like a gambling for hunting, but
Yeah.
it is anybody's game. That's what
Sure.
the long short is if you're just getting started and you are inclined for some of those types of species and those type of opportunities, for what it's worth, it could be you. Like if
Sure. Oh
it's
yeah.
a kid that's 8 years old, if it's a kid that's 14 years old, that's drawing these tags, then they have the same odds as you do as a 35-year-old.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's relevant. And so I was gonna actually ask you like what you thought. I was gonna just a simple question of like what an undervalued opportunity in New Mexico was. And I'm just gonna take that for the answer, Jordan, so we can go into this other stuff. The youth stuff seems like a pretty undervalued opportunity for
Yeah.
folks.
And I want to touch on the guided pool, but to answer your question,
Yeah.
in my opinion, by a mile, Coues deer.
Oh, okay.
The the Coues deer hunting in New Mexico, we don't have the deer population in any of our units quite like Arizona does, particularly on the units like that are south of I-10, south of Tucson. But there is not a unit in the state that I don't think produces a Boone and Crockett caliber Coues deer, at least one every year, if not multiple. So
Yeah.
we're not going to have 50 deer days. You're not going to have 100 deer days when you go into where in the southwest corner of the state and go Coues deer hunting. But as far as like a really like in a world that we struggle to find places to go hunt anything of a
Sure.
higher class, New Mexico Coues deer is one of those that seems to be completely overlooked. That if you love mountain hunting, if you love hiking till your ankles break and glassing till your eyes bleed, if you love that style, to not be taking advantage of how good the odds are in New Mexico as a general rule, there isn't a bad unit in the state. They're all
Okay.
good. Yeah,
Gotcha. I
yeah.
don't think that I've been applying for them. That's a good one for me to know.
But
I go ahead.
if you're a mule deer guy, unfortunately, we don't have a real standout mule deer hunt,
Sure.
right? Like 2C always gets thrown into that as kind of our pinnacle, our primary. But for a lot of guys, that if I have guys that are their ambition is at least a 180 plus, if they don't have any, if there's no goal around Coues deer, then that application should only have one choice on it because there's really only one. Now we have 180 plus deer come out of all sorts of places in New Mexico every year, but
Sure.
they don't come out of the same unit 2 years in a row very
Yeah,
often.
I
It's
got
all
you.
anomaly type situations that happen, and it's cool when it does. But as far as like a consistent place to go and have that opportunity, 2C is really the only one. So if you're looking for something to do with those other two choices, even if it's not that high of a goal, if you like mountain hunting and that style, to not put a Coues deer as your second and third choice is unfortunate because it's really good. It's really
Yeah,
good hunting.
sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good one, man. I'll look at it too. So let's talk about the guide draw. And
Yep.
I want to ask I want you to answer this question adding in a selfish question that I have. So the guide draw is relevant to Oryx. Is that correct, Jordan?
It's all species.
Yeah, all
Yes.
species. So I'm gonna tee this up to you that I have killed an Oryx in New Mexico, but it was not a once in a lifetime tag.
It was
Um,
on the hunts.
what's
Yeah.
that?
It was an off range hunt,
Yeah,
correct?
it was still a blast.
Oh, yeah.
But so I'd love to do it again, right? So if I'm looking at Oryx and I'm willing to hire a guy to do the guide draw odds, explain the guide draw around that and how, I'm going to optimize, one, drawing the tag, but also getting to a place where the hunt going guided is a reasonable cost to me. Can you
Sure.
answer that question in that context? Just selfishly, but I think also to kind of frame the whole deal for folks.
Yep, for sure. So our guided pool in New Mexico, what it boils down to is that through the legislation, New Mexico is required to give 10% of the tags that are allocated for whatever hunt code you're applying for to guys who are under contract to go with an outfitter in New Mexico during the application period. And that what that can be and the off-range Oryx is a great example, a great place for this to work for guys, is the legalities around what happens when you've drawn that tag are quite mellow, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is that you're only required to be with a licensed guide through a licensed outfitter for 2 days, and then you're free to go and do whatever you want. But you're so those off-range hunts are for the calendar month that you drew. They start on the first day of the month, they end on the last day of the hunt. And so for a fraction of the cost, if you have time, you can take advantage of those guided pool drawing odds on a hunt like that. Schedule a 2-day hunt, which is typically going to be, it depends on who you're going with and kind of a few different parameters, but it seems like after the sales tax, because everybody has to add the sales tax, so we're going to land somewhere in that $1,800 to $2,500 price range to accommodate that 2 days, right? And there's all sorts of reasons why there's even a little bit of a spread in there, but that's about what guys should expect. 1,800 to 20, and now you're going to go with somebody for 2 days. Now, if you're booking a 2-day hunt on an archery elk hunt that's 2 weeks long, when every notable guide in the state is probably taking a fully guided 10-day deal or a 5-day deal or whatever the case, that's one of the things we're very careful with, of how we kind of present this idea to guys. You're going to have a warm body that has a guide license with you for 2 days. For a lot of help with that process, they could very well they could know more about elk hunting than the guy that's with them making it legal, right? Like it is not a guide in any way, shape, or form other than, and then he has a guide's license. It is someone to make it legal, and that's where the money is being spent. The money is being spent to get better drawing odds, not to have someone kind of show you the unit and get you started. It's more of it seems like a miscommunication that can happen. Now, even myself and the guys here at the office on occasion will jump in and do a 2-day. And if you end us, like, it's probably gonna go really well. But I think going into it hoping for somebody like that is we're outside of the nature of what those programs exist for, right? Just for the better drawing odds. Now, one of the unique things with us here at the Draw, like maybe the right way to articulate this is, so a normal process for a guy to be in that guide pool, right, is that he reaches out to an outfitter. The outfitter oftentimes will take some sort of deposit, be it $500, $1,000, something of that nature, and essentially that locks everybody into a contract. Once that contract has been signed and the money's been exchanged, then the outfitter will give them their outfitter code to apply with. And the money that's being spent is always included in the total cost of the hunt. So when they draw, they've already, they have some money on the table for the overall cost of that hunt.
Like that's a deposit for the hunt.
That's right. So the hard part is two things in the nature of what that's a very normal process that thousands of guys operate with New Mexico. The hard part of that is that now we're committing the same guy that would do a really good job on an off-range Oryx hunt is the same guy that would do a really great job on an ibex hunt or a northeastern antelope hunt or whatever, right? Like you're just saying that one guy. And to that point, in my opinion, some of the very best outfitters in the state are very clear with their clients that they're applying, saying, don't apply for this or that or the other. It's like, you need to keep in this box because this is where we can do the best.
This is where we operate. Sure.
And they have a lot of confidence in themselves in this place. And so what we've done is that we have an outfitter that we work with here in the state. and he's licensed everywhere in the state. And when you're working with the draw, we get you in that guided pool with an application contract, and then there's no extra cost to that. Like, you pay us to submit the application the same as anybody else does. And but then on the backside of that, two things are happening. We're applying very loosely, if you will, all across the state for what we believe is it lines up with your goals, be it
Sure.
biggest and better drawing odds, whatever the case may be. And we're not limited to any one method or the other. And then the second piece of that is, when you are successful in drawing one tag or the other, then we have the autonomy to move you to whatever outfit you believe will do the best for you. Not to say it has to be our decision. Like, if you have some outfitter that you believe will do better for you, they don't have to be an outfitter that we work with. We fill out what's called a transfer document, releasing you from the licensed outfitter that you applied with, and then moving you to whatever licensed outfitter is going to take you on the hunt. If guys are interested in our opinion on that, then great. We'll share our thoughts, and this is who we feel like would do a great job on that hunt in this part of the state. But you're not married to that. That's the beauty of it. It's no different than if you were to draw a tag in Utah or Nevada or Arizona. Once the tag is in hand, then you get to start making a decision on who the best fit is for you, and there's no additional costs.
Are you posting? Is there any deposit being posted up if somebody's working? So, okay, all right, and that may seem like a minor thing to people, but that's a big deal, because I mean,
like, we stay in our lane, or I feel like that's what our goal is. We want to submit applications. We think we can help people a lot in not only just getting it done and on time, but with where they're applying and the theory and the logic they're using for their three choices and all of those things. But then on the backside of that, we're as involved as guys want us to be, and no different than these other states. Now there's a tag in hand, and it's like, okay, you're in the guided pool. You have to make some decision about what you're going to do, and that could be as simple as a 2-day deal. It could be a full-blown hunt, and it has to obviously be with a licensed outfitter in New Mexico. But you have, other than the fact that you do in fact have to go with an outfitter at some level, you have all of your options still on the table the day that you draw the tag. You can move that space as fluidly as you would like, so that you end up with whatever hunt you've drawn, you've end up in the place that you feel like is the best fit for your goal you're trying to accomplish.
So let's say that my personal plan is I want to go on a 5, 6, 7-day off-range Oryx hunt, and I'm willing to pay that $2,500 for the guided deal and to use your service. What am I looking at in terms of just a ballpark, like, probability of drawing versus just the random, or versus the outside the guide draw?
Most of the time, though, outside of the guide draw, we're going to fall into about a 2 to 5% chance of drawing.
Okay.
It's talking specifically on right now. If we're in the guided pool, we're probably going to jump up into that 10 to 15% chance of drawing for most of the states, or most of the months, most of the dates that are available. The one asterisk to that is, it seems like September, October, November, like, everybody wants an Oryx hunt to not conflict with a potential or an elk hunt that they're going. And so, as a general rule, those tend, if your goal is pretty high about coming to New Mexico Oryx hunting or coming back for, like yourself, if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of time in those kind of core hunting months, it sure does feel like year in and year out, those are the best drawing odds of the year, versus as soon as we're kind of outside of that window, everything again drops back in the guide pool into that 10 to 15%, which a 1 in 10 for an animal like that, and the hunt, and a month-long season and all of those things, unfortunately, in the world we're living in, is pretty good odds.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah,
it's not great.
They're a
Yeah,
cool, I mean, they're super cool species to hunt.
yeah, I love it that you've come and done it. If
Yeah.
more people knew how good that hunt was, like it would be one of the most sought after tags in the country because it is. I'm a geek about it. I think part of it is I just grew up in Utah, so even though I've been here since, for all intents purposes, since 2006, like every time I go, it's just like the first time you put them in the glass, you're like, oh my god, look
Yeah,
at
oh
that.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, like,
like,
I can't, you can't believe that they're there. That's like
it's
my, you know.
and then when you see them and then they just drop their butt and run three
Oh
miles
yeah.
from, like, oh, like this is gonna be a hunt. Like
Oh yeah.
I gotta work my
Yeah.
butt off this. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah, that's they're really great. But it's yeah, the guided pool, that concept works pretty much across the board. And I think that
Yeah.
that's one of the guys, if more people knew two things, that they don't have to commit to that, to a full 5 6 day guided deal. They
Sure.
can choose to go for 2 days. It's a lot more cost effective. They're getting the drawing odds. Go into it with an open mind that, again, you're going to be with somebody that's making it legal. Sometimes that
Yeah.
works out than other times, but that's what you're paying for. Drawing odds and someone there to make it legal.
Yeah.
Then you're kind of free to go and do your own thing and make what you want out of the experience. And then the other thing, instead of being married to one operation or the other, and saying that this guy is the best for everything I'm applying for, and this is where the best bang for the buck and the best value for the money. If you're willing to spend, $50 with us per application to be in there, then you're maintaining all of your freedom of what to do when you do have a successful draw.
Yeah, sure. You could do the 2-day deal. You could transfer it to somebody that takes you on a 6-day hunt too, right? It's
Yeah.
all
And again, we're as involved as guys want us to be. Like, we
sure.
obviously have opinions about who would
Yeah,
do a
yeah.
good job, but we also, have, I have like a common one is we'll get a guy that's like, I've always wanted to, or maybe they've done it. Maybe they elk hunted with this one operation one time and they really loved it. And the guy did a really great job with them. And yet they're concerned that same guy may not be the right fit for the antelope or an oryx or a sheep
Oh,
hunt or
sure.
whatever. And so even those guys are shifting over to us, allowing us to apply for all species. And then if they draw the elk tag again, then bam, we fill out the transfer document, and there's not a single dollar that changes hands between us and the outfitter, or us
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
customer, or anything. It's just we make sure that paperwork's in place so that there is a legal transfer, and they're off and running, and they're getting to execute the plan that they probably had the whole time. It's just that if they happen to draw something else, now they might be looking at other options that they feel like would do as a better job in some, like, say, antelope hunt, oryx hunt, ibex hunt, whatever the case may
Sure.
be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think it's a great service, man. And it makes a lot of sense. I mean, like you say, in today's day and age, I mean, for a lot of these hunts, if you can get up there to, if you can get up to 10-15% draw odds on hunts that you want to go on, if you're spreading it out across a few states, you're gonna go hunting. You're gonna hit one of these cool hunts, and if you combine it with some other hunts
And
that are easier to draw.
that, like, who knows when you're gonna get, who knows when that money that you spend with an outfitter actually now is involved in a hunt, right? It's with a
Right.
random odds, there's like a blister there that it's like, man, I don't, I've been playing with this guy for 3 years, 5 years. He has $500 of my money, and I don't know I don't know when this is ever going to happen for me. Our service allows there to just, it's more of a annual thing, year over year,
Sure.
that allows guys to have a lot more flexibility on the back end, particularly, and you're not ever married to it year in and year out. We're as involved as guys want us to be.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Hey, let's cover the rest of the speech. Well, if you have any, outside of the guide draw, if you have you got another 15 minutes, Jordan?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, let's hit the species, man. If there's anything new, new on them, or if there's anything, just general recommendations. Let's finish up Oryx and then do Aoudad and Ibex and then elk. Sound good?
Yeah. Yep, for sure. So one of the one of the things, just I wanted to make sure I hit this in there. If you hunted New Mexico last year, right? Harvest reports are due also on March 20th. You're kind of late to the game right now. It's going to cost you $8. You should get flagged when you submit the application that you still have one due. But if you don't pay that $8 for last year's application fee, then you're going to go, all of your applications are going to get rejected. So
Okay.
yeah, make sure guys are aware of that. And then just going species by species, antelope. One of the things that guys need to pay close attention to with the antelope and other species is that if you are um, applying outside of the guided pool, there needs to be at least 17 permits available in the hunt code that you're choosing to apply for. If there's not at least 17 permits, then there isn't enough tags to activate the quota for a do-it-yourself non-resident. So on antelope is where we see that really play out probably more than any other species. Is if you look down through the regulations, there are a lot of hunt codes that have less than 17 tags associated with them. So it's a wasted choice on your
I
application.
got you.
Once again, their software is quite smart and it will call that out. It will tell you you're
Okay,
about to
let you know.
for a tag that there isn't enough tags for, but that's why it's doing it. It's saying, hey, you've got to have at least this many. If you're in the guided pool, that opens up a whole lot more options because now, as long as there are 10 tags, then one of them can be set aside for the guided pool. So as far as antelope goes, I just don't, there's few units in the state that I don't think you can have a very successful hunt on. Some units have more goats than others. If you're applying up in the northeast corner of the state, be prepared to be hunting with some sort of mapping service on your phone constantly.
Sure.
You're going to be hunting smaller segments of state land and grassland and things of that nature. But there really isn't a bad unit in the state, in my opinion, for a chance at a above average goat to include. I think you could kill a book goat out of any unit in New Mexico. Some of the real standouts, obviously, are like the southwest corner and the Gila. That's really has a track record for producing very big goats. But if you're chasing the drawing odds, anything with archery in the guided pool, you're definitely chasing good odds. And just the sheer number of tags available up in that northeast corner, if you are willing to hunt with some sort of mapping service on your phone, definitely seem to be a better roll of the dice than some of the other stuff. Barbary sheep would be next. Last year they pretty much doubled the number of Barbary sheep hunts that exist and the number of tags that existed in New Mexico. The reason they did that is because we have a ton of sheep. Like, it is as good as it's ever been in New Mexico for sheep hunting. They have a rut hunt for the two different regions that happens in October, which is obviously just like anything else. Hunting in the rut's fantastic. Sure. But if you're up for a grind and you've got some time and all things considered, I mean, we've got guys that were even out this last week killing Aoudad in New Mexico. So it's not hard to turn an Aoudad hunt or Barbary sheep, like we call them here in New Mexico, into an off-season kind of experience. And it's really good right now. It's and the drawing odds are as good as they've been in a while because they doubled the number of tags that they're issuing. I think that we will eventually see a bit of a cause and effect to that in New Mexico, but we're going into the second year right now, and I think there's that many sheep that even we're going to be able to sustain this for a little while before we start to see a downturn. Ibex, a couple of like the big things to point out is that there is not enough tags for a do-it-yourself non-resident to apply for a muzzleloader tag in the or in the once in a lifetime hunt. There's only 15 tags on each of those. So if you have any ambition on hunting ibex in New Mexico as a non-resident, you have to put in for the guided pool in for muzzleloader and or rifle. There isn't enough tags for any non-residents, any way, shape, or form on the youth hunt. And then the archery stuff, there is plenty of tags for non-residents and guided pool guys, but the ibex is in really bad shape. Guys need to
Yeah.
know that getting into it, that we are really holding our breath down here, hoping to see a recovery, but the state decimated that herd over about a 10-year period. And it was always difficult with a bow. It is next level difficult with
Gotcha.
with a bow up there. So before guys spend $1,600 just for the tag to come down here, at least be aware that
Yeah.
the overall herd right now is probably 1/10 of what it was 10 years ago. It's
Jordan,
very
Jordan, what's the short and sweet on that? Is the state concerned about recovering the population, or if it were to just vanish, would they be okay with that? What's kind of the scoop on that?
To be honest, I don't know exactly where Santa Fe sets on this issue. I know that the biologists on the ground that are kind of watching over that stuff are very concerned that they're, because of how many goats there were previously on the mountain, there was also a very high lion population on the mountain. And now that that population has been reduced so dramatically, there is a concern that not necessarily the hunting is having as much a cause and effect as it was when they were killing lots of nannies up there. That's reduced dramatically, but maybe the lions up there are making like the recovery.
Making recovery almost impossible, just because it's
Yeah,
like, yeah,
so they're really below a mark. It all started from in back in like 2013, so 11 years ago. They did this over-the-counter nanny hunt where they killed like 400 or 500 nannies in a 2-day period up there. And if you killed 2 nannies, you got a chance to get a billy tag. And they had 10 of them up for grabs. So the whole world showed up to hunt that little mountain
yeah,
to try and
sure,
get a chance at a billy tag. And the where that came from, as I've understood it, is that there was an original agreement with the BLM about what the carrying capacity was for ibex on that mountain that would not affect the low population of deer and javelina and things that already existed there. And they were, for what it's worth, they were at least 2, if not 3 times higher population
sure.
than what the original agreement was. That being said, their rebuttal to that seemed like it was a little overshot. The goal was to get about 800 animals on the mountain, and we, as I've heard it, this is not a this is definitely by passing conversations. It's
Yeah,
not a
sure.
hard number that I'm aware of, but as I've been told, we're setting at about 200 or just less than 200 total ibex on the whole mountain right now.
Oh, okay.
And they overshot kind of the objective. And just watching other things happen within the biology departments and the agendas on different species in different states, my guess is that there was some goal of overshooting it, right? So that
Sure.
then they could build back up. Everyone's holding their breath right now, hoping that maybe they didn't overshoot it completely, and that at some point there will be a bit of an uptick, and get over a hump that all of a sudden we do start seeing an increase. And if at that point we can get back into that 800 total animals and then manage accordingly, great. But right now it's for all of us that love that mountain and love those species, it's unfortunate. Like
Yeah,
it's very, very difficult. And the overall age class that exists is non-existent. I mean,
I gotcha.
these even the governor's tags up there are taking, you know, 35, 36-inch billies. Whereas when I first started hunting up there, there was a guy or two a year that was killing 50-inch,
Yeah,
capabilities,
sure, beast.
different than
Yeah,
what it used to
I
be.
we gotta have another podcast on these topics, Jordan, because I think they're so interesting, man. I actually saw a similar dynamic a little bit in Colorado on mountain goats. A lot of people
Sure.
don't realize that mountain goats, the state game department in Colorado views them as
Invasive.
yeah, they're an invasive. They aren't a native species there, and that has never been really an issue for, 'cause, I grew up there. It was not an issue. People didn't really care if they were or not. People liked hunting them. People liked seeing them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yep.
But it wasn't an issue. But it's interesting within, you can talk about, how wildlife is managed in the US, but certain individual biologists can make a big difference in this regard,
Oh,
and I think a lot of hunters are unaware of that, individual biologists, and I think all, like, the vast majority of them are good intentioned. I'm not saying that, but in terms of how things translate into, less hunting opportunity, just a couple people can change that, like, very drastically. Like, hundreds of
yep.
hunts can poof
And
gone.
gain momentum, right? As we
Sure.
start seeing, um, maybe for good reason, maybe not, whatever the case may be, like we're starting to see like the national parks even are
Sure.
now conducting hunts and doing population reduction and using hunting as a means to do population reduction. And as they do, it's emboldening different individuals, to your point, that have unique stances on these on maybe species that aren't native to that area, and they attack, they find their
Yeah,
angle,
sure.
and they go for it, and they, right, wrong, or indifferent of their stance, they uh, are tasked with coming up with the plan, and that's why the state is paying them, and so the state jumps in and
Yeah,
goes forward
sure.
with them, and the next thing you know, we lose. And New Mexico, it's interesting because at a minimum, I have yet to hear a formal agenda around not having ibex on the mountain.
Yeah.
And I think that if there was, that there would have been some formality around it, no different than there was a very formal stance and information distributed when they opened up what we call the rim here in New Mexico, which is above the town of Alamogordo, used to be included in a draw area for the Aoudad. Well, there was a plan that they wanted to execute around introducing desert bighorns to the rim.
Oh,
And
okay.
so they went over the counter for that area for the Barberries, and there was no there was no hiding what their goal was. They were hoping that hunters would there and kill the heck out of those
Yeah, sure.
odd, so that there wasn't as much competition as they introduced and spent a bunch of money to get the desert bighorn. There is a whispers in the wind, you will, of a similar agenda happening on the Floridas with the ibex. But at a minimum, from my chair, I have never heard even any, like, all of that's happening on the public side of things. I've never heard a formal statement at all from the state that that is their agenda.
Yeah.
I really think that it was they were trying to line up with the BLM. The BLM said, "Hey, you guys signed this deal."
Sure.
Mind you, it was back.
Yeah,
It
they had an agreement, right?
needs to be revisited personally, but
Sure.
they did have, the state was probably, hands were tied about being in line with that until some new legislation or new deal was constructed, and so they did. Did they overshoot it? In my opinion, did they overshoot their goal? No pun intended. Yes, they did. In my
Yeah.
opinion, but that I don't. I've yet to hear anyone from the state articulate uh, an agenda that that would be the only thing that makes sense, is get rid of the ibex so you can put desert bighorn up there. There is a lot of people in New Mexico that feel like that's what's happening. I've yet to hear a single word out of the state that that is any way, shape, or form the agenda. I could be wrong, but
Yeah.
it doesn't. There hasn't ever been a formal statement made in any regard, and they have a history of not being scared to present those ideas, just like they did on the rim.
Yeah,
Is
sure. So
so
why, yeah, why wouldn't they? I mean, the whole exotic thing's interesting to me, Jordan. I'm so biased because I mean,
oh
I've guided a bunch of native sheep hunts. I love bighorn sheep, but I also love hunting exotics. Like for me personally, man, like, I know guys in West Texas that, have culled out a lot of their Aoudad, to accommodate bighorn sheep and that stuff. There's part of me that's like, why are you doing that? Those Aoudad are so much fun to hunt and they're so robust.
well, and in a world like again, like if we could have a whole hour conversation about how much bighorns matter to me, like they do.
Sure.
They have that is I am cut from that cloth. That bighorns are the pinnacle. Like, and I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
just the rarity of hunting them and all these things considered. But as a hunter and as a conservationist and all these different titles that I try to be,
Yeah.
the idea of any one time that you're going to take away, like the rim is a good example. There was no less than 100 people a year taking advantage of hunting barberries on the rim
Yeah,
during
having awesome hunts up there. Yep.
great experience when that was included in the draw area.
Sure.
Um, the whole idea, now it hasn't worked very well, but the whole idea was to kill them all in there and then replace them with desert bighorns. So you're going to displace at least 100 opportunities to go and have a reason for people to be out there taking advantage of the public land and all of what comes with that. And you're going to hopefully in a 10-year period replace that with one guy.
Yeah.
Like to me, there is an anti-hunting agenda wrapped in that, and that's a pretty bold statement on a podcast. But
Sure.
I do think that there is a bit of an agenda that if you can displace hunters and take large successful things out of the equation and replace it with things that inevitably are only going to have a very limited opportunity. If it isn't an agenda, well, then it's a serendipity that they're loving, because
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it is.
Well, and
Anytime.
I think the other part of it, Jordan, is like when we see those things that, and it may be a hunt that we don't even do, but if there's a hundred hunter, hunting opportunities there, like we really got to protect that because the more and
Uh,
more, the more and more hunters we get into this, like those things are pretty important, you
yeah, I
know.
think so. And so I don't ever want to take away from the sheep, because I do love them and I love everything about all of that, and I love the amount of effort that there has been to get sheep back on the mountain, and I just
Sure.
absolutely love it. But I'm also watching my son and my other kids growing up, and when I see large number of opportunities go away to make room for very limited opportunities, that I believe that there is danger in that we should be always aware of.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And I'll be
Yeah,
honest with you, my opinion on it, Jordan, is the only thing different about the hunt is the picture. Hunting
yeah.
hunting desert sheep or hunting Aoudad in the same topography. It's the same, guys. I know that's gonna break some guys' hearts, but it is.
I'll go one step further. If they told me I could only hunt one species the rest of my life, I promise you, without a second thought, I would pick Aoudad.
Oh,
I am
really? They're cool.
I I love them. I I think it's so rare that you get an opportunity to go hunting anything nowadays that is like 10 years old, right? Like
Sure.
your goal to find something that's that really
Oh,
older
yeah.
age. And oddly enough, their set's Aoudad. It's quite available. It's not near as expensive as a lot of stuff that's out there. And yet, if you're into hunting mature animals, like there's nothing more available in the country right now than Aoudad to scratch an itch like that. And
Sure.
point, like I've yet to walk up to a big ram that I didn't just like, whoa,
Yeah, oh,
like
yeah.
you feel so rewarded, like gosh dang it, we killed ourselves for this. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
usually looking at your phone and you're like, oh my Lord, it's so like,
Yeah,
how did we get clear back here?
gonna be a
And
journey.
yes, yeah, I'm a sucker for them. I love the exotics. I love the Barberries, especially. The first time you see a ram coming down a ridge and those shaps are just swaying underneath him and the sun's just blowing up off of him, like if that'll change your life, I swear. That
Yeah,
is,
yeah. I mean, there's also something from my perspective to this. It kind of ties into this whole conversation. Is they're just a robust species. I mean, I've been in places where like you couldn't raise anything there, and there's like hundreds of them running around. You know,
yep.
it's
I,
wild.
I, I agree. It's they're fantastic, and it's I love the other sheep, but I am a sucker for the Aoudad. I think they're
Yeah,
so
pretty
fun.
cool. Pretty
Yeah.
cool. Well, hey man, let's talk about elk for a second. Or yeah, you already covered mule deer. Hit on elk, and I think we can wrap it up, dude. I already took extra time out of your day.
So elk is I'm going to break elk down in three categories in New Mexico. So elk in New Mexico, we have what the state and what we call here the core, right? And the core is a state acronym. I don't even know what it means, to be honest, but we just use that same word. And the core is going to be places like the Sacramento Mountains, the Gila, that have a good population of elk with a track record for an above average age class, right? So when you're trying to find the best stuff in New Mexico as a general rule, or that on all fronts, hunting the Gila, the Sacramentos makes a ton of sense. That being said, that's where everybody wants to go hunting. So the odds of drawing in those units are relatively low compared to lots of other places in New Mexico. But the second place, I kind of we call it here at the office the Northern Triangle. So if you were to flip a triangle on its end and have Santa Fe as kind of the point of the triangle, and then one leg running towards Chama and one leg running towards Raton, it's kind of an upside down triangle right there. So the Northern Triangle is the highest elk herd, highest elk density in the state. Because of that, they issue a lot of tags in those
Sure.
units. Because of that, there's two things. It's not common, it does happen, but it's not common to see guys shooting huge bulls in the Northern Triangle. Like in most of those units, in most of the situations, if you see a 300+ inch bull opening morning at first light, you should probably kill that bull. Like
Sure.
that's going to be a top 15% kind of bull when the smoke clears on the year. Are there guys who shoot 350 plus kind of bulls in some of those units? Absolutely, there is. But you shouldn't be waiting on a bull like that. You see a nice 6x6 in those units, you should shoot that bull. That's what you're there for.
Right.
The drawing in those units, because there's a lot of tags, is usually quite a bit higher, right? And it's because there's a lot of tags, a lot of elk. And so for guys who just want to go elk hunting and have a good experience, and they're not so concerned with shooting the biggest thing that walks in the woods, the Northern Triangle is a really great place to kind of set your sights on, whether it's 51, 52, 6A, 6C. There's a few that are better than others, obviously, just like anywhere up there. But overall, anything in that Northern Triangle tends to be a pretty positive experience for guys who just want to go elk hunting and have a chance to be successful. Um, the last kind of areas in New Mexico are what we call fringe units. And for all intents purposes, the fringe units are going to be like lower elevation, desert type units, as well as even getting out into the prairie in the far northeastern corner of the state. The fringe units have very low elk density as a general rule. They issue very few tags in these units, and for all intents purposes, they're not very fun hunts. Like
Yeah,
they're
I
not.
gotcha.
Yeah, it's not good elk hunting at
Yeah,
all
there's struggle.
in the fringe units, and because of that, the drawing odds are better. You can find these wrinkles in some of the fringe units that have relatively better drawing odds, especially than the core. And those units, to me, when guys have a stack of elk antlers in their garage, they can't run and jump over, and it's like I don't want to just go elk hunting to kill another bull. I'm looking for a big bull. New Mexico's fringe units are a great way to still take advantage of New Mexico, and the fact that because there's so few tags, as a general rule, a lot of those units have upper age class bulls. They kill some really big bulls in these fringe units year in and year out. And not always, but often you have better drawing odds in there. So those units, if you went in there and spent 2 or 3 days and never saw a single elk, like that's not that shocking.
Sure.
Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what that's what you're signing up for. But if you're the type of guy that's just like, man, you could put 50, 300 to 330 class bulls in front of me and I'm not shooting them. They don't do anything for me. Then the fringe units are a way of getting better drawing odds and being in a place, mind you, not very good at hunting, but you're in a place that you could shoot that 350, 370 class bull. It happens
Sure.
every year. So that's what, if I'm a guy trying to make a decision on what to do for elk in New Mexico, like that's what I'm looking for. I either am just defaulting to, I don't want to go unless it's really, really good in every way, shape, and form. So be it. Put in for the Gila, put in for the Sacramento's, 16s, 34, 36. If you're looking for lots of elk and a really fun hunt, but probably not going to shoot a big bull, the Northern Triangle is like that's where you should
Sure.
be focused. And if you want to elk hunt and be more aggressive about it, but you're really looking for an upper age class elk, look in the lower elevation units that in the deserts and in the prairie. Obviously, be mindful of private property and things of that nature when you're starting to look at fringe units. But there is a number of them that are producing some really great bulls year in and year out. It's just the guy who shot it, that might be the only bull he saw all hunt. Like
Yeah, yeah,
it,
sure.
that type of stuff happens. So obviously, those are not for everybody. It takes a unique guy with a unique career of elk hunting for those to be very appealing. But there are guys like that out there, and that's, to me, that's where they should be. If they want a better chance at drawing, they should be looking at the fringe units.
Yeah, yeah, I gotcha. Good deal. Well, I think we covered most of it. Oh, javelina. Worth
Okay,
it?
I have a hard time. you know it's weird. It's like a growing thing,
Oh,
right? Like
yeah.
you're starting to see it kind of pop up more and more on social media and stuff that um I quite like hunting javelina, but it's also very selfish. It's like I put my kids in, they draw. The season
Go
for the
have
kids
fun.
3 months long. I don't ever
Yeah,
have never has to like cannibalize something else that I'm doing. So the hard pill to swallow with the javelina is like is the cost, in my opinion. Like it's $178 plus the hunting license plus the application fee. If you're in the guided pool, now you've got more costs
sure.
associated with it. Whereas like um, the it's and I don't know that our javelina hunting is as good as a lot of places in Arizona.
Arizona. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's my one hesitation with javelina is we have them. It's fun. I like it. Javelina seem to be like a real pockety animal. So that's kind of what makes it fun is you cover a ton of ground. You feel
Sure.
like you're killing yourself to find them. Once you do, it usually works out pretty well.
Yeah, sure.
So I like them. It's you know, if you're not applying for anything else in Arizona, then New Mexico would kind of make sense at that point.
Right. Yeah.
But if you buy the $160 hunting license for anything else in Arizona, then to not put a plan around a javelina hunt there versus New Mexico probably wouldn't make sense to me.
Yeah. No, I get I hear you. I it's funny because it seems to be interest is growing in it.
It is.
I've never hunted them, but
You got it.
people ask me about it.
They're a cool little sucker to and for the kids, like my little girl's got a tag right now that before the end of March I've got to make some time and probably be
Sure.
after this new deadline. But that's her first. She's not 8 years old right now. It's going to be her first go at it. It's my son Parker. That was his first go at it, and it's a perfect species, I think, because if you shoot an adult pig, it's got tusks, it's got
Yeah, yeah.
all and you're not where it's like as soon as you run into a herd, like it's like cow elk hunting. Like it's
Yeah,
gonna
you got action.
we
Yeah,
yeah we did it, and as a general rule, they're not crazy. So a kid usually has enough time to
yeah.
make a good shot and all of those things. But yeah, if you're not applying for Arizona, New Mexico starts to make sense, cost versus value.
Sure.
If you're putting in for Arizona for any reason at all, like I feel like that's a better place to spend the money because
Right.
you're getting more value out of that hunting license that Arizona makes us buy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, good deal, man. I think we covered it all. Jordan, you got anything you want to add?
No, not really.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
let people know where they can where they can find you again. I'll give them all that info in the intro too, but let them know right now if they've
Yeah.
made it this far.
So obviously anybody can find us on our Instagram is kind of where we're probably the most active on social media. It's at We Are the Draw. And then from there, if you end up on our .com, it's just thedraw.com. And you're going to see two buttons kind of front and center on that homepage. One of them says find a hunt. The other one says apply for hunts today. If they go into that apply for hunts today, it's going to ask you for a little bit of information. You'll hit submit. And then based on that information, that's we kind of pick and choose who's going to be the best consultant to get on the phone with you and start working through whatever your goals happen to be. If they're as simple as just a New Mexico elk application, great. If it's more complex than that, like our guys are ready to kind of talk you through whatever it is that you feel like you need a help kind of putting a plan together on.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, you too, Cliff. Thank you for having us on. These are always fun, and anytime you want to do another one, I'm game.